Good day. I'm Doug Carlberg. I'm president of Carlberg Consulting and past chair of the San Antonio Manufacturing Association. Thank you for tuning into our podcast. The series is called Lead With Me. It's all about leadership. And today, we really have an exciting guest. I've known this gentleman, probably over 30 years. Scott Gauvin. He has spent the last 30 years helping organizations build workplaces in both human central and high performing. As a CEO of Macresco and co-author of Respect for People Roadmap, which we're going to talk a little bit more about, it's really a phenomenal program. He has worked across industries, geographical and redesign systems, mindset, behavior, and driving meaningful and measurable change in organizations. He is also a contributing author with Lead with Compassion, Cultivating Connections from Inside and Out. Scott is guided by the belief that lasting transformation happens when strategy, culture, operations reinforce one another, unlocking potential of every level within the organization. So with that, Scott, thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Appreciate it.
It is great. We're doing this remotely today. This is the second time we've done it remote, and it's a fun way to do it. Scott, tell me a little. Yeah, I know. Tell me a little bit about how you started with your career and how you got involved within manufacturing and eventually with consulting.
Yeah, so my career really started with a small family-owned manufacturing business, and like many family-run businesses, everyone wears a dozen hats. So I got to tinker in finance and in purchasing and IT, and of course in the operations side of things. And it was really when I was on the operations side that I really started to kind of fall in love with just the operating models that help the business run and help build and manufacture the products, and I just loved every aspect of it. And so that then propelled me kind of forward into, I had a couple of other gigs after that, and then I fell into a consulting role. It was more on the IT side, and ironically it was helping to implement MRP systems, and so did that for a couple of years.
Yeah, and which is pretty amazing because back when you started doing that, we were converting from MRP to ERP.
I know.
Timing's everything.
I know. And so that was, so I kind of tinkered with that for a little bit. And I had a boss that would say, we design great systems and great processes, but it's these dumb people that keep messing them up. And that always struck me as just a little odd. He would blame people for all the problems that we had. And I could clearly see that there were system problems, there were process issues. Then I found Lean, and all of a sudden my world was upside down. No more managing through the computer. It was actually being physically with people, and all of these analog ways of managing processes, but they were so much more effective. And then of course, shortly after kind of being introduced to the Lean systems, got involved with AME, and I think that's where we met. And then things just kind of snowballed from there. And I've been in love with the practice of Lean ever since. So,
for those of you that don't know what AME stands for, it stands for the
Association for Manufacturing.
Association for Manufacturing Excellence. I just had a short blip in my brain. I've only been involved with it probably for 40 years. So anyway, yeah, great organization. It's a nonprofit educational organization based out of Chicago. So tell us more about AME.
Yeah, well, I got involved with AME. I was still pretty young at the time, and got kind of roped into be part of the Northeast region where I was living at the time, from Boston originally. That then, over time, eventually snowballed into me being a president of the Northeast region, as you know. And, the goal really was, for the time that I was involved with AMI, was to really just help manufacturing companies learn how to improve the business, and in lots of different ways. A lot of it centered around, obviously, the lean practices, but it was about bringing all of these different people together from different kinds of companies to just share what they knew, to learn from each other, and to really help each other grow in their knowledge and in their personal development, but also helping each other's companies kind of grow each other. And it was just this very collegial experience. It was such a fantastic learning environment to be in, because people would invite you into their organizations and say, "Hey, come and kick the tires and check it out," and they let you know everything, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You got to see it all. But the great thing about that is you got to learn. Like, you got to learn from other people's mistakes. You got to see the best practices that others were doing, and sometimes they applied in the environment that you were in. Sometimes they didn't. But you got this experience, and you really just got to see lots of different ways that the same problem could be tackled, and resolved in a dozen different ways. That was pretty amazing at the time.
Yeah, I mean, and that's really how we really started to spend a lot of time together, because at the time when you were president of the Northeast section of AME, I was the president of the Southwest, and we spent a lot of time together at national meetings, on the board meetings. But the other interesting thing about it, we really got roped into their international conference that we held around the country. And we actually even held it up in Montreal and Toronto over the years. So tell us a little bit about that experience, being on the board and also having to participate and help facilitate. And I know you gave a number of presentations at the conferences. Talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Yeah. When I became the president of the Northeast region, it was a little intimidating, because everybody that was on our board at the time was at least 15 to 20 years older than me. And so I'm the leader of all of these people who had way more experience than me, had way more knowledge than me. And so I felt a little inadequate at times, because just, even like yourself, I mean, I would often come to you for advice. Hey, these are some of the challenges we're having. But it was an interesting dynamic, because it really helped transform a little bit on how I thought about leadership. That plus the experiences that I was having, in the consulting work that I was doing, really gave me a very different perspective about what leadership was. It wasn't about having the answers. It was about, how do you bring people together so that you have this collective wisdom that you can tap into, and really, how do you bring that collective wisdom together to for everyone's benefit at the end of the day, right? So everyone was there giving of their time, and that was the other amazing thing about AMI, is no one got paid for it. It was a completely voluntary thing, and I think about it now, and the hours and hours that we would put into supporting this organization, completely discretionary volunteer time, and it was really, at the end of the day, this collective purpose was, how do we help improve manufacturing wherever manufacturing was. It didn't matter if it was, in my town, in my city, in my state, even in our country. I mean, we, as you mentioned, we brought the conference to lots of different places, right, including Canada. And so, and I know from just the people that I met, We had people who came from England. We had people who came from Australia. We had people who came from all over the world.
Yeah, or typically we'd have over 20 different foreign countries at the conference. And some years we had pretty close to 40, which was pretty amazing. And the conference would draw anywhere from 1,800 to 2,200 people for a 3-day conference. It was just amazing. And here again, it was all based, and we had a very small paid staff, but it was all based on volunteers. And you'd have everybody from a small company, a mom and pop shop, to all the way up, and you'd have companies like Harris, which is now L3 Harris, basically a Raytheon as a couple, and TI or a couple examples of some of the big boys that really had their volunteers working with us. And they all had the passion that we did. We all were learning from each other. It was just amazing.
Yeah, and and it was interesting because as the longer you were in the organization, you could see this transition happen where you were the learner at the very beginning. That's kind of where I felt I was at the very beginning. I was a learner, and then at some point you start to transition where half the time you're the learner, half the time you're the coach. And you could see that transitioning happening for just so many different people in the organization, where you would in one moment be the learner and the next moment you'd be the coach. And there was just this humility that everyone I met in the organization had. And it was just a great example of what leadership really looks like, bringing that humility that you don't have to know everything, that you can be the learner in one moment and you can be the teacher in the next moment. And there was this great back and forth that we would always have, especially when we'd get together, on the national level, when we'd bring everyone together. It was a great learning experience. I very much valued that time.
I can tell you, with my career, if it hadn't been for AME and some of the other organizations I get involved with, like the Shingo Institute, I wouldn't have been as successful as I was. Mm-hmm. It basically added a lot of the tools I needed in my tools kit to really be successful. Mm-hmm. The other transition that you and I both made at about the same time, talking about giving back, we developed basically a standard for excellence, and we came up with the prize for manufacturing excellence. Mm-hmm. And you and I helped put that together, and then we transitioned as examiners to go out and kick the tires and try to help people where they were on their journey. Mm-hmm. To become lean toward the Toyota production system. Mm-hmm. And we'll be talking about the Toyota production system in a little bit, and it really focused on respect for people, and that was their secret sauce. But and that's the other topic we'll be coming up with here in a little bit. Tell us a little bit about the experience being as an examiner for AME.
Yeah, I gotta give a little shout out to Michael Bremer, who has really continued to make that program successful, and one of my mentors, Larry Anderson, I know a good friend of yours who has been a great guide in that process. Being an examiner is just it's a humbling and incredibly rewarding experience. These companies invite you in, and you are brought in as a quote unquote expert. And I can't tell you how much I learn as the examiner. We're going in to kind of examine and to assess and to give feedback to the organization that we're looking at. But I probably learn as much as I share with these companies. It's amazing to see, the diversity of what these companies have been able to accomplish. And it is an incredibly, if you're curious about, how to do things differently, become an examiner. It's such an education. And it really, I think as an examiner, it really helped enhance my ability to be a consultant, because it gave me the ability to see so many different companies and see so many different ways to really accomplish the same thing, to solve the same problem, but in a dozen different ways. And so that has been a valuable experience. And just the openness that people have when you come into their company and you're asking them, you're drilling them with questions. and you're trying to understand what is it that they're doing, how are they doing it, and in some ways you're kind of trying to check off, okay, hey, have they met this criteria? Have they? Because that's what you're really assessing them against. Have they met the criteria to be considered operationally excellent? And in some cases they, as you know, they have succeeded. In some cases they've come up short. But the graciousness that these organizations show in sharing the information and receiving the feedback. I mean, these reports that we end up putting together, as you know, are pretty comprehensive. They're pretty amazing, and they're almost like a blueprint for what do you need to do next. And that has been invaluable.
Yeah, it is a lot of value, and a lot of companies, they don't meet the total criteria the first time. They take that report, they go back, and they re-implement some of the programs, and they reapply. So we've had a number of companies that went through, didn't quite make it, came close, and took the feedback, and then they got recognized for the award in future years. But it's amazing because the examiners for AME, much like the examiners for Shingo, are all volunteers.
Yeah.
And they're out there, and you get very high, competent people that have been in the industry for years to come in and kick the tires.
Yeah.
It's really some very cost-effective consulting because you're just paying for basically the cost of running the facility and travel and some time to put the staff report back at headquarters. But that's it. It's interesting. So every time I do a site visit, my team back at the plant would say, well, we're going to have 2 or 3 new projects next week because Doug's going to pick something up when he's out there at that examination.
Yeah.
And I always did. It's lean is a continuous journey, and you just find better ways to do it. And it was a great learning experience, much like you had. I mean, I was blown away.
Yeah.
So much with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a great program.
So let's go back a little bit about what you're doing now. I mentioned it in your bio when I brought it up, and actually I went through the course, and it's quite a journey to go through it. It's a roadmap to get there over multiple weeks with multiple learning. But tell us why you put together this program called Respect for People.
Yeah. So it kind of started many years ago. I had a project in China that just didn't go quite the way I had expected it to go. And it forced me to kind of rethink the way that I was doing the consulting that I was doing. And one of the things that it challenged was how I was showing up, and was I being respectful? And so I started looking at that, and I started looking at what lean is. If you look at the Toyota model, there's 2 pillars. There's continuous improvement, which is the process optimization, and then there's respect for people. And lots written about continuous improvement, very little that we know about what respect for people is. There's probably a bunch of reasons, which we won't have to get into now, why we don't know so much about respect for people. But I think one is that most people think that they already do it. Most people are like, well, I'm respectful, so check, I've got that. And so then they move on to the process optimization. And what I came to appreciate, and as you know, I spent almost 5 years researching this to really understand it. What I came to appreciate is that we often think we're doing respect for people, but what we're actually doing is respecting people. And respecting people is an individual action. It is how I personally show up based on my value system. It is in that moment of interaction, and it's not universal. It's not how we all show up. Respect for people, on the other hand, what I came to appreciate and learn was that it was this universal practice that everybody engaged in, that it was something that wasn't reactive but proactive. It was how you thought about designing respect into the processes, into the systems, into the policies, into the culture of the organization. And so I started as I started kind of understanding that, and as you know, I did a lot of research where I spoke to a lot of people at Toyota and in other organizations that I thought had a good respect for people practice. And there were three things that kind of kept coming up. And one was that they really saw people more objectively. They saw the behaviors that people engaged in more objectively. The second was that they really valued the entirety of a person's experience. And then the third was that they really valued bringing together this collective wisdom for this mutual benefit. And so as I started thinking about those things, I said, well, wow, how great would it be if I could teach my client organizations to do that? And so I started trying to back into, well, how would I teach my client organizations how to do that? And I realized that just those three things weren't enough, that I had to identify what were the behaviors that would allow me to see behaviors more objectively, that would allow me to value the entirety of a person's experience, that would allow me to bring together collective wisdom for this mutual benefit. And so as I started backing into that and continued to do research, I came up with 9 behaviors. And as I started trying to teach my client organizations those behaviors, I started to see this practice of respect kind of emerge. What happened was that it was very ad hoc. I had a lot of great methods and tools that I was developing on how to kind of make that happen, but it was still ad hoc, and I wanted it to be more systematic, and I also wanted it to be based in science. And so spent better part of almost 5 years trying to bring this together in a systematic way that was not only systematic, but it followed a methodology that others could replicate, that was also based in the behavior sciences, in the neuroscience, in the social sciences. And that's kind of what has emerged as what we now call the Respect for People roadmap. And one of the things that we were challenged by is that it's really about shifting a mindset. So, shifting the way people think so that they can then behave differently, so that they can engage with each other in a better way. One of the things that we realized is that, that is fundamentally culture change. And then when we started looking at culture change, we realized, well, culture change, the way we typically do it is we take the leaders off site, we give them this education, we ask them to then internalize that on their own, develop these new behaviors, and then go cascade that into the organization. That's completely unrealistic. And so we had to come up with a methodology that allowed that to be more systematic. But the data point that popped for us was that when we started looking at the way people change, or the way that people kind of adopt change, the theory is that, if you get the leaders to change, well, then everybody will follow those leaders and adopt those new behaviors. And actually, the research and the science tells us that that's actually not true. That in fact, it's the opposite, that frontline employees expect leaders to behave in a certain way, but they don't feel obligated. And so that kind of crashed our program, and we had to kind of rewrite it so that we realized that, well, everybody has to have this experience. Everybody has to kind of go through that training, go through that learning, so that everybody's on the same page. And so that is really what has become kind of the Respect for People roadmap. It's a program that we do over a course of about 15 weeks, 10 to 15 weeks, depending on the requirements of the organization, where you're learning not only those 9 behaviors, but you're learning the 3 key principles of the practice of respect for people. And we do it with mixed cohorts. So it's leaders and frontline employees, and everyone is now, establishing kind of a baseline of what the practice of respect for people is. And so it's most of it's done virtually. So a large portion of it is asynchronous, so the people can kind of do it at their own pace. There are parts of the program where we bring together everybody in a live session. That could be virtual, or that could be in person, depending on the facilitator. And then there are moments where you're paired up with someone else in the cohort to actually practice the tools and the practices that we've developed in to gain these principles and these behaviors. And so it's a very multimodal kind of learning experience. And then, as you know, the final piece is where you're developing your better plan, and that is, how are you going to take on personal Kaizen? how are you going to better yourself, and adopt some of these new behaviors and some of these new mindsets. And so wherever you find yourself challenged, you make your better plan, and then for the next 12 weeks, you're paired up with your accountability partner, and you're practicing getting better. And what we're seeing, Doug, is it's been amazing. We've only been so the pilot, the beta ran for a couple of years, but this past year is when we've kind of launched it for more public consumption, and we've had unbelievable results. We've got one company who, within 8 months of putting the entire organization through the Respect for People roadmap, they're seeing a 25% improvement in productivity and output and shipments, and they hadn't even at that point started doing any formal continuous improvement work. So they hadn't even started formally doing any process improvement yet. What was happening is that because people were communicating better, collaborating better, the continuous improvement was happening almost organically. And so people were raising their hands saying, hey, we've got this problem, how do we fix it? And so we could bring the tools of continuous improvement to them to help resolve the issues, but they were organically raising their hands saying, hey, we're talking about this and we realize this is getting in our way. What can we do about it? And that, that's a gold mine if you can get that to happen in an organization.
Yeah, and actually, if you're starting off in lean, starting with this program first before you start putting the tools in your toolbox on the lean is a great way to do it. And that's really the Toyota way, by the way. And this is a great program. I went through it myself. Two of my associates at Carlberg Consulting, Larry Anderson and Mark Dukevitz, we've all gone through it. And we rate it very high. It is very down to earth, very hits right home, a lot of TED Talks in it, and a lot of other good exercises. So you put a great product together. I understand you've already ran it through over 1,000 people.
Yeah, so we've had about 1,000 people who have gone through the program at this point. So and like I said, we're seeing a lot of really great success with it.
Well, I've got a couple questions I want to ask about your leadership, because you've come up and gone through a lot of learning experience over the 30 years. The first question is, what is your greatest failure, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so I earlier I mentioned that so certainly I've had my fair share of failures, but the one that I mentioned earlier that stands out for me is the project that I did in China. So I was brought in to help refurbish an entire manufacturing operation that really hadn't changed in over about 25 years. Had a really strong business case, and I had all the support I needed from leadership. And up until then, I had a pretty good track record of process improvement and change. I had some very successful projects. I'd made a lot of big improvements for organizations that I was supporting. Lots of cost reductions, quality improvements. So I went in with a lot of confidence. So I showed up the way I had always, confident. I was pretty well prepared. I was ready to dive in, roll up my sleeves, and get to work. And I did what I had done in the past, where we kind of kicked off with the business case for change, shared that with everyone, did some basic lean training, gave people a broad understanding of continuous improvement, introduced some of the tools, so value stream mapping, 5S standard work, Kanban. We even went through some activities of relaying out some of the processes. I did all the stuff that had worked in the past, but this time it just wasn't working. In fact, things were actually getting worse. We were shipping less, quality was actually getting worse, and morale was not great to start, but it was actually getting worse than when we had started. And then one day, one of the young engineers that I was working with, he pulled me aside and asked if we could have dinner that evening. He said there were some things that he didn't feel comfortable sharing at work, but that he needed to talk to me about. So at first I thought he was going to share something about himself that he was struggling with. And then over dinner, he told me that the problems that we were having was it was me. And I didn't understand that basically that I didn't understand their culture. I didn't understand how things got done in their culture. And effectively, he was telling me that I wasn't honoring their culture. I wasn't trying to be disrespectful, but there it was. People were feeling disrespected, and so the changes I was pushing were causing people to lose face, to maybe be embarrassed because they had designed those processes or had put those things in place, and here I am saying, okay, this doesn't work anymore. And even though some of the changes actually were benefiting them, they were, people were quietly resisting or maybe, and sometimes even undermining the changes. And so, momentum, we weren't getting the momentum. So if you've ever had that feeling like when you do something that isn't reversible, I remember times when I've deleted a file and I'm like, oh my God, I can't get that back. And you just, you go cold almost inside. That was kind of what happened in that moment. And so that conversation really completely changed the way today I think about culture. And so up until then, I had believed that continuous improvement was universal, that what worked for me, in the US would work pretty much anywhere. But I learned that culture is dynamic, and that what works in one place may fall short somewhere else. And just because something works well in one context doesn't make it inherently better or even really universal. So I was lucky to learn that lesson while I still had time to turn things around. Once I took a step back and I slowed down, I showed more curiosity and more humility. Things began to shift. It required me to really think about this practice of respect for people. It's kind of where this idea of like, okay, well, what is going wrong here? And I started really thinking about what was going wrong, and I realized that respect for people, not the idea of it, but the actual behaviors that I needed to embody in order to practice it. And so I really started thinking about that. So I started to shift the work from creating change to practicing respect. And slowly over time, I was able to create an environment where more people trusted me, where we had more direct and honest conversations about the problems. And then again, kind of what we're seeing with the Respect for People roadmap, organically continuous improvement started to happen. People would ask me about different tools, or they'd ask me to help teach them different things, or they'd ask me to help them solve a different problem. Eventually, that factory became a world-class operation, and the experience gave me kind of the foundation that I needed when I moved on to do work in many other countries. I did similar work in France and Germany, Mexico, Malaysia, several other countries. Looking back, that project was really the beginning of my journey to understand what Lean truly is about. It's not about the tools. It's not just about continuous improvement. It's really about people. It's about building systems and shaping culture. And every time I went into a new company, I would hear, "Oh, we're different. It's not going to work here." And so what I start to realize is it's actually true. Every organization is different, and the way we did it in one place isn't necessarily going to work the same way in that place. Even if the processes, even if the products, even if the markets, even if the tools are similar, the way they come together is unique for that group of people in that environment. And so one of the biggest takeaways for me was finally understanding what respect for people really means. I used to think, as I mentioned, that it was about being nice to people, and that was enough. But that's just the basics of respect. And so respect for people, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's really key that you really understand the culture that you're going to, especially in Asia and in the Middle East. I mean, having a facility up in Massachusetts and having another one down in Alabama, they're really two different cultures.
Right.
And even though we had a facility up in New England, we had one up in Montreal. You talk about a major shift, and it wasn't even going outside the continental of North America. Mm-hmm. So it's the secret sauce. It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. My next question is: what do you think the biggest misconception that people have about leadership?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions about leadership is that it's about having the answers. It's about always having the answers, that you're the one that has to have the answers, or that you're the one that has to drive the results, or being the person with the strongest presence in the room. A lot of people think that leadership is about control or direction setting, setting the course, being the person that sets the course and getting people to follow it. But in my experience, that's not where kind of real leadership lives. And I learned this even through AME, because I didn't have almost any of the answers when I was the president of the Northeast region. I think real leadership is about creating the conditions where people want to bring their best, where they feel safe to speak up, where they feel safe to challenge the status quo, to take ownership. It's really less about telling and more about listening. It's less about pushing change and more about cultivating an environment where people can change and can grow. And I learned this the hard way when I failed the first time in China. I showed up with what I thought were the right tools and solid plan for improvement, but I hadn't created that condition for people to engage, and I hadn't honored the culture or built the trust needed for people to come along the journey. And so the misconceptions I had and I think that a lot of leaders have, is that if your logic is sound and your intentions are good, people will follow, and you've got the business case to move forward. But leadership isn't a formula. It's really about developing relationships. So for me, leadership isn't about power or persuasion. It's about practice. It's the daily practice of respect. It's the practice of creating safety, building trust, bringing the kind of building and creating the kind of environment that really inspires people. And I think that's, for me, leadership is about, the job of leadership is creating inspiration in others so that they can then bring their best. So,
Cool. Great advice. Really great advice. My last question, as you look forward, what do you see the greatest challenge is for the next generation, and what advice can you give them?
So, as I look ahead, I think one of the greatest challenges for really the next generation of leaders will be learning how to lead across cultural, generational, functional, and even philosophical, differences. The world is just, it's more diverse, it's more connected than ever. And yet people feel more disconnected. It's ironic, right? We're more connected than we've ever been, but people are feeling more disconnected, more misunderstood, even more unseen. And leaders who try to lead with a one-size-fits-all playbook I think are going to struggle. What worked in one environment or one era or isn't necessarily going to work in another. And so I think the leaders need to be, the new leaders are going to need to be very adaptable. I learned that lesson the hard way in China. I came in with all the tools, a strong business case, and it just didn't work. So my advice to the future leaders is don't rush to fix. First, listen and learn, and make curiosity your kind of default setting. Take the time to really understand the people that you're leading, understand their history, their fears, what matters to them, and how they make sense of the world. And that's really that's really the foundation of respect for people. It isn't about being kind. It's about practicing empathy in a way that helps others feel seen, heard, and valued. And also, don't fall into the trap of thinking that tools will save you. And that tools are helpful, don't get me wrong, but only in the hands of the people who trust each other and are aligned around purpose. So the real job, I think, is to create kind of an environment where collaboration, where honesty, and shared problem solving can really thrive. That takes humility, it takes patience, it takes a willingness to model what you want to see. So,
great advice. So, Scott, if people wanted to learn more about respect for people, that training module, how can they find out?
Yeah, so easiest way is just to go to the website, respectforpeopleroadmap.com, or they can reach out to me directly. And you can reach me on LinkedIn, Scott Gauvin. Just put in Scott Gauvin, and I'm probably the first one that's going to come up. So you can reach out to me directly via LinkedIn as well.
I'm on LinkedIn too. You can follow me there too. And by the way, if you want to view past podcasts, you can look on the San Antonio Manufacturers Association's website. That's sama-tx.com or carlbergcg.com to view the past podcasts that we've done, and including some training sessions that we've done other than the podcast. So, Scott, thank you so much for joining us today. I mean, this is a lot of great information and a lot of things that people can walk away with. You have a great day.
You too. Thank you, Doug. Thanks for having me on. It's always great to catch up.